Spreading the map out this week as far as our guests are concerned, it is our first American. A great interview with a brilliant surfer, Sindia Sosdian, and she's an amazing scientist. Plus, how cool is it to have that American accent on Crest? I'm Tom Anderson, welcome to the show. Some other news before we start. We're now available on Google Podcasts, thanks to a bit of jiggery-pokery from producer Dodd. So if you're listening to us on another platform but want to pick us up on Google, it is now possible to do. And lastly, very importantly before we start, an extra incentive to be a Crest listener if you didn't need one already. This week's episode is brought to you by Porthcawl Surf School, and to celebrate this partnership with Crest, for the month of September, and while stocks last, listeners to the show can claim a free car freshener and a bar of wax from Porthcawl Surf School at their centre at Rest Bay. How do you prove you're a Crest listener? It's simple. You need to show on the screen of your device that you have downloaded this week's show and that you're working your way through it. Turn up at Porthcawl Surf School with that piece of exciting evidence and the guys will show their appreciation accordingly. Enjoy the show, guys. It's Sindia Sosdian. Best jobs for a travelling surfer? Surely this is one.
We're speaking to someone whose fieldwork has involved touring some of the planet's most interesting patches of ocean, from Indonesia to the Norwegian Sea. Sindia Sosdian's work diary looks like the checklist for a search movie.
But when did she realise the placement she'd make permanent was going to be Wales? Listen on to find out.
Yes, of all the places this New Jersey raised ripper could have chosen to live, Wales has ended up top of the list. A bit of rotten luck, or a vindication of our qualities as a surf destination? We'll be posing this question to Sindia in due course, among others.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to have one of my favourite Wales-based surfers on the show today. Welcome to Crest, Sindia.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Good to see you.
I'll tell you what, this is a rarity. It's a first for Crest. I think it's a first that we're sitting down interviewing a guest with whom we have actually just scored some pretty good surf. We just had a good fun surf, didn't we?
Yeah, it was really, I do feel like I've been kind of given the tour here. Go surf the Asp, surf the Coney Corner, and, getting the tour by you, Tom, that's pretty nice too, yeah. And getting some good waves.
A couple of bombs came through and it was just us.
Yeah, it was really nice. I got some good lefts and did a few turns, and then you traded off some, and I think I pulled in a barrel, but I don't think so really.
Yeah,
so.
I saw it. You did.
I tried.
Now, just for the listener record, I'm Tom Anderson, and partly at the request of Sindia, and partly because of how good a job she did of keeping Logan Nicol in his place 2 weeks ago, my co-host today is Breige Lawrence. Breige, what's your favourite thing about Sindia as a surfer? Because you've spent some time in the water with her too, haven't you?
Yeah, where to start really? Of course, I can just appreciate Sindia's natural style when she's surfing. She's very accomplished. She's got all the moves down. We were at the wave recently and she was smacking the lip. It was great. I've also got a lot of respect for Sindia as a cold water surfer. She's got good cold water credentials coming from Jersey. Wales is actually relatively warm in comparison, I think, to some of those winter days. And also, whatever the conditions are like, different spots, everywhere I've been with Sindia, she's just keen to get in there, this Coney, 2 foot on the mini-mal, or if we've been to some West Wales point breaks and just, get in, get a surf. She's, recently moved to Llantwit, and much respect for getting to know that tricky wave. And
the local crew.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and for me personally, Sindia's had a big influence on me because I'd reconciled myself to not going anywhere near any Indonesian reef breaks. That was just not going to be something I was going to do. And then having a conversation with Sindia, and she was telling me about surfing Ulus, and then she was encouraging me to do it, and that was like a watershed conversation for me. And I went away thinking, maybe I can. And then, went out there, actually surfed it. It was fine, and and then managed to go to other Indo reef breaks after, and it's opened like a whole new area of surfing for me. So that was thanks to your encouragement, Sindia.
This is great. I love this podcast already. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm going to have to add that mention of the cold water to the list of topics coming up then. First, though, a little introduction to whose guest voice we've just had a taste of and are about to enjoy for the next hour or so. As mentioned, Sindia hails from New Jersey and has settled, fortuitously or not, in Wales through her work as a paleoclimatologist. I've often told people she's an oceanographer, but I get the feeling I'm about to be permanently corrected on that one. What is safe to say is that she's a scientist of high renown who gets to do field work in some of the most interesting patches of water on the planet.
I can confirm the doctor title was indeed down to a PhD in oceanography from when she was still Jersey-based, before a research stint in Australia was then followed by her arrival in Wales. Besides her lack of Welsh accent, Sindia was immediately recognisable in the lineup, though, for all the right reasons. Someone who takes the act of riding waves as seriously as studying them, or what's underneath them at least. Sindia is a standout whenever she paddles out. A combination of power, style, aggression and synchronicity makes her someone who will always pull your gaze back towards the shore whenever she takes off.
And we didn't write that after the surf this afternoon, but I can confirm that was definitely the experience this afternoon. Having made it clear from the off that her career decisions have always been based around getting access to surf spots, Sindia is therefore a great person to drill down, literally, as we'll shortly hear, on what it means to be a surfer and what exactly our relationship with the ocean is and should be. And we'll start there, I think. Sindia, you actually use the ocean floor, don't you, to tell us very important things about the planet's story, past, present, future.
Yeah.
What exactly does your current research involve?
Well, yeah, you're right. I am a paleoclimatologist, and not many people kind of know that term. I don't know if you ever watched The Day After Tomorrow, but the Dennis Quaid character, he is a paleoclimatologist.
Oh, is he?
So he always says these really abrupt, dramatic things about climate. I'm not as dramatic or abrupt, but we look at past climate, so that's kind of the paleoclimate. And my research has taken us to being on drill ships for many months, to extracting mud from the deep ocean floor. And then within that mud, there's these microfossils that are the remnants of organisms that were once living in the surface ocean or the deep ocean. And we bring that mud up, and then we actually can look at it, see what the microfossils look like. And it's pretty cool, actually. They're like a cell-size thermometer. So you can take them, grind them up, and put them in a fancy machine that we have at the university called the mass spectrometer. And it can tell us what the elemental composition is. So basically, we can look at what elements from the periodic table are present in that fossil. So if you were to go pick up a clamshell from anywhere you guys surfed or touched a coral, it's made of a limestone or a mineral, and basically the chemistry of that mineral allows us to look at climates in the past. And so we explored the Norwegian seas and trying to understand that environment on longer timescales, like since the last ice age, so maybe like 20,000 years ago or something like that, to thinking about kind of, well, once upon a time there wasn't ice on Antarctica, so when did ice eventually form and how? And so you can find microfossils that were living 30 million years ago and do the same sort of thing. And so part of our work is going around on these kind of labs, these floating labs, and actually picking places to look, going to different ocean basins to figure out where we're going to collect mud that was deposited at the right time to tell us something about that environment. But I didn't know about this stuff until, I was maybe in my 20s. So I'm not an earth scientist by birth, so it took a little while to kind of get there.
And being a keen surfer, I'm sure, I wonder how much your career path was kind of guided by keeping the opportunity to surf and having the chance to go to surfing places and...
Yeah, it's pretty much everything that has guided my surf career. And, now that I look back, I keep thinking maybe there's going to be a time when I deviate, but actually probably not. I started out just surfing Jersey and then going to a local university that was close to the sea to be able to surf more flexibly. And then I decided what happened is, about the hurricane season in the States, right? Because you guys get residual swell. Yeah. So we were getting a lot of different, the number of named storms for different seasons were different. And it was being driven by El Nino, which is like a climate oscillation in the Pacific. And I was really interested in that, like why one of my summers isn't as good as some of my other summers. I don't support like hurricane devastation, but it's really good for the swell. And so that kind of piqued my interest. And then I had a professor who just said, you could do this for a living. And so I thought, okay, I'll do that. I could surf and I could also study the ocean. Why not? And then fortunately, a university took me. In New Jersey, a Marine and Coastal Sciences department took me, and I was able to kind of learn more because I did a chemistry degree. So I kind of had it. I don't know about you guys, but in undergrad, as a high schooler, we didn't have earth sciences or geography, so I only knew mostly about kind of basic physical sciences. And so it wasn't until I went to do my PhD actually that I learned about the Earth system.
Okay.
And when I surf, I can think about what we were talking today about the temperature of the sea and thinking about why is it variable relative
it felt
from
like
the
it
S.
was different in the two spots, didn't it?
Okay.
We were like the S seemed colder than the Coney corner. Why was that? Was it the wind, or was it we were talking about the depth of the water and stuff like that, or just when you see something living, you think about how the environment shapes its kind of life and habitat. And so I think all that sort of stuff kind of evolved in my PhD, and throughout that, you get to kind of go and travel, and then try and surf the locations you travel. And so I had one research cruise where again we went and collected cores from the deep ocean in New Zealand. And so I remember surfing some good spots. I went and surfed Raglan and Piha, and just a bunch of kind of like big nice surf. And I did feel fortunate, and all the people thought I was a bit crazy because I was always carrying my board around and forcing us to take it everywhere.
It's got to be done.
It's got to be done. One time we went off the coast of Santa Barbara. There's an island called Catalina, and we were trying to grow these organisms. They call it culturing, and I surfed there, and I dragged my board in a van, fit it in there, and forced them, and it was maybe a half a foot, but it was everything I needed at that moment.
Put it on the list then.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, I will. I've marked that, Catalina. I surfed Catalina Island. So that whole kind of interaction around the surfing and thinking about the Earth system more was what piqued my interest.
And the fieldwork trips can be quite good for tying in with the surfing most of the time.
Yeah, the fieldwork trips can be good most of the time, but then some of the time not so good. Recently I had to go to Fiji to do some coral reef work, which we may talk about later, but I remember we had 12 days of intense diving, and I set aside the last 2 to quickly drive 3 hours to where cloud break was. And I mean, I was a fool, really. I didn't look at the swell, I didn't counter anything because the research had priority in that session. And I remember we got there, I had a boat lined up, and it was just flat. It was one of those ultimate faceplant moments. And he was like, "You should have been." I swear he said it. "You should have been here a few days ago." I'm like, "What is this? The endless summer?" Have some passion for me.
I was working.
Yeah, exactly. And so that wasn't as ideal. But I have been when we went to. I'm trying to think of one of the places. We were in New Zealand. I got some good swell, and Borneo. I got to surf one day. But sometimes it's tricky kind of finding the balance. But
if you can get a tie in at all, I'm sure that's a score where you just think.
The best trip was the Indonesian trip because the whole team was there for 3 months and I was just there for a month. And it was basically going around to all these earthquake impacted islands and kind of looking at the corals and seeing what was happening. But they were places like Nias, Lombok, Flores, Bali. It was still really hard for me because when we got to Nias, we went the exact opposite direction of Lagunju Bay. So we were going to be on the other side, and so I didn't get to surf then. But at the end, I stayed behind in Bali and got to surf all the spots like Uluwatu and Impossibles and Banyak, and so that was really ideal. And I still have got those are some of the best memories I've had paddling out at Uluwatu at 6 foot, and going through the cave and everything you guys remember.
Magical, So then you moved to Wales, and how did that work out, and why? What brought you here?
Yeah, a series of gnarly decisions, I suppose. I feel like, at a certain point in your life, right, in your 20s, you're just like, I want to travel. And being an American, I don't know, I feel like we are stereotyped, but it is true, a lot of, I didn't travel much beyond the states around me, and I thought that was culture, going to Florida for a good surf session at Newsom Beach. I'm like, I went to Florida, I'm cultured now,
Isn't that the sharkiest beach in all of the US, apparently, New Smyrna?
I don't know. They had good surf. I remember I surfed with the Hopgoods. I remember that day.
Oh, wow, yeah.
We surfed Sebastian Inlet too.
Right.
Because it was like New Jersey, the pilgrimage, the summer pilgrimage was to North Carolina, the Outer Banks, and then to Florida coast. And you just drive for 24 hours straight, stop at a Waffle House, eat a waffle, keep going. But yeah, that sort of, environment for me. I was like, oh, okay, I know you can surf other places, and I've got this job, this degree, which will allow me to maybe travel. So I was like, why not? And so I met a scientist at a conference, and we were just chatting about his research. And he was a surfer and worked in Indonesia and worked on corals. And he's like, you want to come work? We go to Indonesia, come to Australia. Yeah, contact me. And I remember a month later rang him, and I was like, I found something. I found a year-long, funded position that will get me to be in Australia. He's like, okay, great. We'll go to Bali for 2 months. And I was like,
wow,
this sounds great. I just got to get my PhD, Yeah. I finished my PhD, and then
motivation.
I finished my PhD. My money ran out. I had no money. And then 8 days later, I went to Hawaii and met my friend and surfed Oahu for a week. And that was my in-between. So I got to surf Waikiki, Diamond Head, V-Land, off the wall. Wow. And just had a blast. It was my treat.
After all that work.
Had an amazing session at V-Land, where it's just, when you're on personally, the crowd's there, but you got all the good waves. It's amazing.
The rhythm
it's amazing backside waves I got. And then, arrived in Australia in I think the middle of the night, and just rocked up to a share house I was staying, and a week later bought a car and drove to the coast. And then I remember my first session was at Congo Beach, kind of this gnarly beach break. I think I'm drawn to beach breaks, being from New Jersey.
Yeah.
And I surfed, and there was some just really beautiful A-frame bowls, and there was a little left-hand reef break. And you could camp, and if the lady didn't find you in the morning, you didn't have to pay. So that was quite nice.
Save your pennies.
Yeah. And so, I was in Australia for a while, and I thought, I got a friend who works at the uni in Cardiff. And she said, hey, you should come out here. And I was like, okay, maybe. And there was this 1 year, again, position. And I Googled surfing in Wales. And, I found a lot of information, a lot of, good surf spots, reef breaks, beach breaks, point breaks, and then learning all about kind of how the coastline changes direction. So you've got a lot of favorable conditions for a lot of the wind. So I was like, okay, I could do this. And I looked at the seasonal temperature range. I was like, it's not as cold as Jersey. So I definitely could do this. And I was like, I'll just go for it. Why not? But it was going to be temporary. It was going to be that 1 year. I was just going to be here for a year and then go
back to Australia or back somewhere else exotic with waves.
Exactly. Back to Australia. And then I stayed.
Wow. The difference, Breige mentioned that about your being comfortable in the cold. I just want to find out a little bit about the Jersey background, because you were telling us that Jersey surfers aspire to go into the Outer Banks or even further south to Florida. Within Jersey, it's Manasquan?
Yeah, Manasquan.
Is the area you're nearest to. So you started. That was where you learned to surf. And how was Manasquan for a place to learn to surf?
So I probably surfed the most in Manasquan, Point Pleasant, and Belmar was the first place I got a wave. But all the same area, 5 minutes apart. But growing up, my dad surfed and my brother surfed, and I don't know why I didn't. I was always on the inside getting hit by them or something, And then when I was 16, my friend and I were like, why aren't we surfing? And so we started bodyboarding. We bodyboarded for a solid year. We would just charge all the big swells, but we only had one set of swim fins, so we would each borrow one and share, and it was quite funny. So we were pretty rough and ready, I'd say.
Yeah, just get in there.
Yeah, get in there. And I remember
throw yourself over the pool.
Yeah, I remember the lifeguards there wouldn't let us out in the hurricane swell without 2 fins, so we would have to take turns on the beach. We'd give one of us fit anyway. But then, so we just decided, my brother had a board, we took his board, and in the winter, we found my dad's old wetsuits from the 70s and wore them.
Wow.
In the winter, and it's so cold. So I was saying before, New Jersey gets really cold in the winter, and so what you have is the water temperature can get below zero. It can go to maybe negative 6. And then you've got the air temperature.
You are talking in European degrees there too.
I'm in Celsius. I did my work. I knew I was going to be the Jersey representative, dirty Jers, sitting here. I was like, got to look these things up in Celsius. I don't know if I can convert back to Fahrenheit anymore, actually.
Wow. So -2.
Yeah. And then the air temperature can be -2. So what you have is the perfect convergence of just freezing cold. And if it snowed, you'd be walking out over the snow into the lineup, be snowing in the lineup. Your face would freeze. If you had facial, guys' beards would freeze, and then you couldn't talk anymore. And then if it really snowed hard, you'd have to make sure your car was near the beach, otherwise you wouldn't be able to move it. But yeah, it can get super cold. So I remember my hands freezing and not being able to turn my key in the car and having to get like an old woman walking on the boardwalk to say, could you help me please? Or couldn't get your wetsuit off.
And then in the same place, you surf in boardies in the summer, because I surfed at Sandy Hook, actually, in New Jersey, with Dr. Rid Lewis, who's also of Cardiff University. He was on as our fact checker a couple of shows ago when we interviewed Splinter, and yeah, it was warm water, and I think it was a thunderstorm actually. We had to get out the water.
Oh yeah.
Now you were saying as well, the Sandy Hook though is a great little point break, or would you call it a point break?
I call it a point. I call it like a pseudo point break. I feel like here you guys are. You know what? No, if someone in New Jersey listens to this, I've got to represent. It's a point break. It's what we call a point break. You get a good right-hander. It's good when you get kind of side shore winds, and it holds big swell. And so there's certain conditions you go there in, and you can get some really nice kind of flying rights. But there's a big current, and also when it's good, everybody's there, so you're being strategic. And as we were saying earlier at the S when we were surfing, there's also in the summer a swimming section. So although you're in boardies, you got to navigate what is lifeguards and swimmers, and you got to kind of take the wave and then get out quick. But yeah, Sandy Hook is one of the places in New Jersey that people call the point break.
And I always remembered when Rid and I went there, we got this idea in our heads about we wanted to ride a wave and look at the Empire State Building as we rode a wave, look up and try and do it. It was actually quite hard because you're trying to find it in the skyline. Yeah. But you have a memory that I saw the photo of this from 9/11. It was the surf was pumping on 9/11, and you have a memory of surfing there and being able to see the smoke coming off Manhattan.
Yeah, I mean, because we lived in New Jersey, most of our family worked in New York, and so everybody had family members that were working that day as well. And so I remember it was a really good surf, maybe 6 foot and clean. I remember in the morning, we surfed Manasquan Inlet in the morning, and we got out, and then we were told that, planes had flown into the World Trade Center, and we were just like, what? It just didn't, it was unfathomable. It didn't sit with us. I don't really remember what else happened that day besides worrying for loved ones. But then we decided...
You were a grommet when this happened, yeah.
Yeah, we were just young, 20, just enjoying... I don't remember how old I was actually then, but yeah, I was young and carefree, and I remember we just were worried about loved ones in the day, and then we went up for surf again, and the winds had changed. That Sandy Hook was the best spot, but then as you drove down kind of the coastline, there's the plume from the impact was all along the coastline, and when you were actually in the water at Sandy Hook looking over. You couldn't really see anything. You couldn't make sense of Manhattan. You couldn't see the Empire State Building. All you could see was, it was pretty ominous. And all of us out there we were surfing, but just kind of oh man, didn't know what to do with this weird kind of feeling, this weird energy. And I was saying earlier that I don't remember the waves I got that day. I only remember what it looked like in the morning, how it felt when we heard the news, and then that just the awkward we're surfing, okay, there's waves, but you can't, it was a mind trip.
Conflict.
Yeah. But yeah, typically you can see the Empire State Building, although I never tried to surf and look at it, maybe because I was from New Jersey.
Yeah, you're from New Jersey.
I just was it's there.
The thing I remember about Manasquan was that you had to pay to go on the beach. And I think we arrived right at the end of the day, and it was free for the last hour or something, and everyone had gone in because it was the end of just in the summer, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, so in the summer, from 9 to 5, you have to pay. You have to get a beach tag, and each township, so say if you lived here, Coney Beach would be a different badge than Rest Bay.
Okay.
And it's maybe $8 for the day.
Oh, wow.
And they check, so there's a person who sits at the gate and says, do you have a badge? And I remember surfers usually would surf before 9 and after 5. But if the tide's wrong, what do you do? So I mean, we did everything from running as fast as we could, jumping over the boardwalk, because New Jersey's coastline is all full of boardwalks. It's got some of the longest boardwalks. and hoping that the badge checker was old enough they wouldn't run after us.
Too slow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So another thing you could do is you get there super early and just stay on the beach. Don't ever go off the beach
Stay
because you
on.
never go back to the badge
Okay.
checker. But then there was these beach police who would check. So I remember once I was taking a nap and they caught me. I was like, so we had to be on red alert. Like, quick, get in the water. If you're in the water, they wouldn't follow
Okay.
you. Or we actually, I mean, God, we made some badges. You know, we actually bought one and then we copied it, and we just and it turns out the badge checkers knew what we were doing because we
Yeah.
talked to them years on. They're like, we knew what you guys were doing, just trying to surf.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's pretty intense, and what it creates is like these isolated pockets of surfers.
Yeah.
And
Oh, because they've got a license for the one
yep.
stretch. So,
So
yeah.
this whole beach, you'd have, say, like Rest Bay, it would only be a small area.
Yeah.
And the surfers, and they really enforce it, so the lifeguards will, like, tell you off if you drift out. So you'd have to surf that small area, regardless if the sandbar was good. If the sandbar changed, you'd still be there.
You've committed with your dollars.
So you have to be quite strategic about what you did. Like, what we did is one of us would get a badge for there, another one would get a badge for here.
Okay.
Like, 2 different types of waves. And then we would make one. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure other people did this, surely,
Yeah, I'm sure.
as a young person. And then we would, we would use them. But it was really
so could you get
tricky.
like a season ticket then?
You
badge?
could. That was more expensive
Okay.
for people, you know, when you're surfing and you don't have a job.
Sandbar, yeah.
So it
then
would
you
be
need
like
the bags for your
$100
badge.
or something.
Okay.
But you could do that too,
Yeah.
We would just be strategic. We didn't have very much money. We didn't have job. We were just surfing, so
Yeah.
we could kind of just live
Part
on the
of fun
beach.
of it all, I'm sure. It was.
And we, but sometimes, it would be tricky. So you could get there after 5 and then just rock up and surf and stuff
It'd be
like that.
fine. Yeah.
But when we got big hurricane swells and the flags went red,
Yeah.
because New Jersey's kind of, I feel like they kind of over-police this ocean. So the lifeguards want to keep you safe. It's great, but when they put the red flags up for the swimmers, they also wouldn't let the surfers go out. And so we had some incidents where people would just go out and they'd call the police, and the police would extract them from the water and give them a ticket.
Heroes.
Yeah, exactly. But then at 5 p.m., they'd be like, actually, you can go out. There's no more
Once
red
they were off
flag.
duty, they were stood down.
Amnesty.
And,
Yeah. But yeah, New Jersey, I felt like it was a scene. I still remember one time I was in a kind of more wealthy neighborhood after surf, and I was changing out of my wetsuit, and I wasn't naked or anything. I had a towel. 2 police cars pulled up behind us,
Wow.
and they wrote us a ticket for disrobing in public, and it's equivalent to like urinating in public, and we had to go to court and fight it.
It's a cool crime though, because that's what the girl played by Laurie Petty in Point Break is.
Oh,
guilty of, I
really?
think, isn't it? Yeah, that's her previous record. It's how,
I almost could have had a record
it's
there.
how,
That
it's how
was like
Johnny
a-
Utah is able to pull her up on a police file in the first place.
Did they
yeah.
let you off in court then?
Well, yeah, they
Yeah,
did in the
that's
end
fair.
because it ended up the local police officers, they ended up like booking quite a lot of people for the same
Okay.
thing, and they were just being a bit too intense. Because
Yeah.
I don't think I was naked. I was, you know,
Yeah, you
I was
were
just
decent,
changing,
yeah.
But it was,
Tara, that's her name, I think, in Point Break, isn't it?
I forget. But yeah, you're right. You're right.
It's good to hear about New Jersey and how that was growing up. But paleoclimatology, so it's a strand of oceanography. You've told us a bit about what you do, but can you tell us about what you've been discovering and working on recently?
Yeah.
What's interesting about it at the moment?
Yeah, you guys did your research, though. I'm impressed. You're going to be a scientist soon. Well, I can tell you about some of the work we've been doing lately. So a lot of the research is looking at coral reef systems. So I'm sure you guys are all
Good for
aware
surf.
of them. Yeah,
Yeah.
good for surf.
Yeah.
Actually, my first acquaintance was duck diving, you
Yeah.
know, a coral reef environment. So good. It wasn't chosen for that reason, but it does happen to
Yeah.
align. But we're kind of trying to look at, so coral reefs are, you know, these amazing kind of underwater ecosystems, like little cities under the water, and they're really important. So I think like 900 million people live within like a few hundred kilometers of reefs. So a lot of people are reliant on them for things like food, job security with tourism, or also like shoreline protection. Like they provide a natural kind of buffer to coastal storms. But I think you must have seen the news, like they're completely under threat by climate change, and so there's a lot of news about the Great Barrier Reef and how every year El Niños kind of propagate through, and when you have an El Niño, it elevates the temperature that the corals live in for so many days. It's like baking here in a heat wave for 5 weeks and you don't have an oscillating fan. So the corals are just sitting in this like really warm water. It's warmer than they're used to, And what happens is they kind of struggle, and they do something called bleaching. I don't know if you guys have heard of that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the coral is an animal,
Yeah.
and it's the hard bit, and it can grow, but it lives symbiotically with an algae, or
Yeah.
a plant, basically.
Yeah.
And so the plant...
Which photosynthesizes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So light's important for corals. Also the right temperature. If it gets too hot, that relationship between the animal, the coral, and the plant breaks down, and they actually exude or like expel the algae, and so that they lose the color. The algae is the color.
And is it because they want to be a paler colour so that they absorb less heat?
No, it's actually the
Like the way you put a white T-shirt on a hot day, you know?
Yeah, no, that's a good idea. But the coral is it's biochemistry. It's biochemistry, meaning like if it gets too hot, this certain reaction can
Right.
occur.
Okay.
The cell is like cell death, and the algae are like I must leave, and
Yeah.
then they just go away. And what you're left behind with is the skeleton. The coral's still living, the animal, but it's not going to grow its skeleton as fast.
Right.
And if it's in that state, like it doesn't have its buddy, the algae, with it, it'll stop growing, and that's when you can get to mortality and death. And so that's the big questions: is how do corals manage in this environment? How will they manage in the future? And so one of the things we've been lucky enough to do is recently we went to Fiji and we were asking this exact question. And the way we could answer it was by collecting samples.
Yeah.
And so we were able to go all along coastal Fiji to areas that corals have done really well. They're thriving.
Okay.
And then corals are like, ooh, they're not doing very well. They've got like algae growing over them. And what we did is we took drilling equipment and we dived to right on top of the coral head. And I think one thing that's critical to understand is these corals that we specifically look at are brain corals, and they can grow up to 6 meters tall. So
Wow.
imagine if you're surfing and you duck dive and you see it's like a bommy, like a 6
Yeah.
meter tall bommy. So they've been living there for about 600
They
years.
look like brains. They're
Yeah.
big and round.
Yeah, big and round. And
I
they
think
just
I can picture them. Yeah.
Yeah, they've been just growing up every year. And if you were to crack them open, you can see annual layers like a tree ring.
Yeah.
So when you crack open a tree, you can actually count back in time to see how old the coral is.
Wow.
I know, it's really amazing that if you come across this one coral, it's been there for 600 years. So what we do is we'll go stand on the coral, and then we'll take a drill, with a coral barrel, and then we extract a few meters worth of skeleton. So this is all dead. So the only bit that's living is the very thin veneer
Yeah.
of living coral on the top. And so we're just extracting that thin veneer and then what's been previously deposited. And so we get these cores out, and you can already see things like we saw a really big pocket where something was living inside the coral. They call them biorotors, so it erodes away at the biology. And that, we think, was related to a cyclone that came through.
Okay.
So you can kind of pick up on just looking at the core of how it changes its kind of growth to interact with the environment. And so we can start to think about, okay, this thing's lived for 200 years, and it's experienced all these really hot periods. How did it do? How did it respond? Did it ever slow its growth? So we can begin to understand a little bit about the sensitivity to future climate change. And doing that, it helps you think about, okay, if we know we're going to see 2-degree warming in this area, we can expect that this species of corals just won't make it.
Oh, gosh.
And so that helps kind of, the looking at the past climate can help us kind of with future projections. And also, we just get to understand about corals, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So we can look at the coral growth. So it's pretty cool, actually. You just take them. We used to take them and get x-rays. So you'd get your core, you'd have like a cylinder, and then you'd slice through it into a long slab, and then you take it to the hospital and get it x-rayed. And you can pick up on the density changes, just like your bone x-ray. You can be like, oh, growth, oh, death, growth, hole, and then you can piecemeal it. But now we use a 3D imaging, just like you were to get 3D image to your body. And you put the corals through, and you get these super cool images that you can say, oh, I think a sponge was living there. And the scales are like super small, like less than a millimeter.
It's actually quite similar then to the technology that was used to do the autopsy on Richard III, wasn't it, when they found him in the car park in Leicester?
Oh man, I don't even know.
Yeah, I
feel like I've lived here long enough, but I don't even know that.
Yeah, I listened to a lecture of this Canadian lady, Turi King, and it was exactly that. They were talking about the 3D imaging, and then they were saying that they could tell a bone injury and he'd recovered from it, and a bone injury that he hadn't, and this was the death one, and all stuff like that.
Yeah, they've been doing a lot of doing images of skeletons of dead, marine animals, just to see what's happened, and you can pick up things from the imagery.
Right.
So does your work paint less of a bleak picture for the future of coral because you've seen that it's survived these tough periods before, or is it something different now?
I like your positivity. I was like coming here. I was like, I'm going to be positive and like, just breathe positivity. And so actually one strand of our work is looking at that. So we've got a field site in Borneo that is really cloudy water, so turbot. They call it a turbot reef. And so the corals there are really thriving. And so for some reason, when it gets really hot, they're just like, no problem. They just continue growing, and we're trying to research why they're so resilient. That's the word.
And the algae is still with them,
exactly.
Right?
So that reef has had to live in an environment. So if it's really cloudy, there's not too much light, right? And the algae love the light. And so they've come to some sort of space that is, a balance where they can use the energy and the kind of products that come from the algae and photosynthesis, but also eat what's in the water. So they're able, the coral themselves, to eat things that are in the water. Okay. So they can use those two things. And so we went there and we were actually just doing surveys of all these different reefs that were really clear to really turbot, and trying to get a sense for whether or not there was more species of coral and what happens when it gets really warm. And so we were, during the COVID actually, if there was bleaching warning in this area, we were going to go and do like a ready field excursion, but it's COVID, so obviously no one went. But to actually see how they responded in a really warm period. So that's kind of a really interesting thing. We're trying to focus as well on these resilient species that we know have done well.
Yeah.
We know that can bounce back and recover after these periods of warmth. But it is tricky with the projections.
Can it be cultured, or what was the word you used earlier? Cultured like trees. Can you perhaps then take that resilient coral and put it in a bit of the barrier reef that's struggling, like the way we'd plant a forest to try and carbon capture?
There's that's a whole theme of research. They call it coral gardening or coral transplantation. And so what you can do is you can find those resilient species, take them to the lab, culture them, like grow them like they're in your fish tank under certain conditions, grow a lot of them, and then transplant them to a part of the reef that actually could use that sort of, of species or a substrate, because they kind of provide like structure and things for fish to live in and all that sort of stuff. But so you can do that, and actually people are doing that. So they're growing them, and they're even taking it a bit further. They're genetically altering them, so they call it assisted evolution. It's quite a controversial thing, to be honest. Yeah. Where they grow and genetically modify coral species to have algae, or that plant, that is more resistant to warmer waters.
GM coral.
Yeah, no, it's exactly that.
Like a grapefruit.
It's exactly that.
Doing that with other animal species would be really controversial. But
the ethic, So there's this dichotomy, there's two groups of people. They're like, we've got to preach conservation, and we've got to not think about this as a way out. And the other group is like, we've got to do something that's happening now.
Right.
And it is a real kind of hard thing to consider.
Which camp is right, really.
It's amazing that those kind of conversations, they're deep, and that is, I suppose, mine and Breige's experiences of academia is that kind of, heated debate and having to sort of question everything. And I was wanting to ask you a bit about these field trips, right? Because, sorry if this is a cheeky question, but I want to know, how close are they to, my GCSE geography project when I was a kid? On these field trips, are you literally there with, a pair of kitchen gloves on, rubbing your hands through a bucket of sand that you've just pulled up, and then, sitting there with a little clipboard with a pencil and, writing the stuff on, or is it all a little bit more sophisticated than that? I listened to a podcast the other day about scientists who have been looking at sewage, and in fact they've been looking at sewage to try and find out if it's got COVID spores in it, because they reckon that it's a cheaper way of predicting which city has got COVID on the rise, because you just look at, and they were saying they've literally got pots of shit in their
I read
their
about
office, just
that.
sitting there. Is it like that? You know, so is it
science? It's all for science.
You know, or is it like much more sophisticated than my geography project as a GCSE? I know you probably did a geography project too, didn't you, Breige?
Longshore Drift
Yes.
on Newton Beach.
You were
There's
actually-
pebbles going across.
With your stick.
Hanging out with a bunch of geographers. I didn't even know.
Sorry, I don't want this to be like when Rob asked, the
Not
triathlete
at
Emily
all.
Williams, about his advice. It gave her advice on how to go for a 10-mile walk, But it's like
No, this is a
it
good
like that? Is
question.
it is it a pair of kitchen gloves and sand, or is it sort of?
Well, I say, so we take the university students out, and usually we do say, okay, dig what you see in the sand, any microplastics. So, but what we do, it's an interesting question. So, what we do right now is a bit more sophisticated because we know that there's a problem. We know that we need to go to a specific location to kind of diagnose that problem, like Fiji corals are doing well in some areas. So we know that that's a good area to try to answer our questions. But in the early days, like the sort of thing where you get a glove and look at the sand, that was what was happening. So, before we had scuba, we didn't know really what the coral reef environment looks like. And so once we had scuba, those first scientists were actually diving and going, oh, we have 25 different species of hard corals. And that sort of science was happening, where you rock up to a place, and going to a new island and seeing what species there are is your big mission. But now we have all that information, so we have a generally good idea about kind of the species composition, what the reefs look like.
So you're starting from the basis given to you by previous research.
Yeah,
Right.
and so now we have all this cool technology, right? So people are doing 3D imaging underwater. So basically, they're doing pretty impressive mapping of they call it the rugosity or the reef framework, to see how it goes up and down.
Right.
It's just incredible. Or using satellites to actually remotely determine how properties change in that
Does that mean
area.
that you're getting your dive mask on less though now?
No, I'd say that no, there's nothing. So to do the drilling, you have to be like a technical team that goes in the water, has the expertise, so knows what coral
Which one to
species.
choose, yeah.
One that also had a good life, one that you're not gonna drill into and there's a clam living there.
Okay.
So and you want one that's kind of grown a normal life. Some look really like bumpy on the top, which
Right.
means they've kind of struggled. So you're looking for one that'll give you the best kind of normal data set. So if you get one that had an abnormal life,
Yeah.
like that abnormal life can impact your record and your data. So you have to have that knowledge. So the scientists who go in, they have to have that expertise. And the technical drilling, it's like a certain group, and you got to know when you're drilling, like how far. Oh, okay, I've reached the bottom, and you got to be able to do that. I would say that what it is that you don't have to dive as much to learn about the environment. And so I'm diving to collect the samples. That's a big part of it. I'm also diving when we were in Borneo to just look at what was there, because we were diving in turbid waters. You couldn't see very much. It was quite cloudy, but you were looking at the different species there, doing a survey. So no one's done that, and you can't really use satellites. But go ahead.
You're using the word dive quite off the cuff there, but like this isn't going to be what like we might assume. Like your Paddy, like you are a good diver, aren't you?
Yeah, I've come a long way, and to do this sort of diving, you have to get a certain like certification to be signed off for risk.
Right.
So I've gone through, and I've done up to like rescue diver, emergency first responder. Like I've done that whole suite, and so I can be a part of this technical team.
Wow.
And as you go through and do more drilling and more kind of diving, you get more certification. But in Borneo, it was pretty gnarly because you were purposely diving in murky water. So the viz was super low. And I still remember our most turbid site was near this village. So also you're dealing with kind of like the toilets are just the village. And so you're like, okay, it's okay, let's get under. And then you go under, and I don't know what happened, whether or not it was one of us, but someone touched the bottom. And it was just a plume of silt and clay. And I couldn't see anything but like the person's ear to the left of me. And I was just like, are we aborting this? Because we can't see anything. Surely if we can't see anything, we can't do anything. Eventually we all aborted and went up, and we were like, okay, only the two best divers are going down there. Because it was just such a sensitive area. But
You can't even see your teammates who you're supposed to be doing it with.
But to be in this, you definitely have to be in a space
And you've
there
got to
where
keep
you're like,
calm then, haven't you, to conserve
completely.
oxygen.
Because you're part of the team. Yeah. You've got to make sure you can be down there as long as you need to support the team. And we were rolling out like survey equipment, taking videos. We were down for about an hour.
And then a couple of weeks, excuse us there, I think Mark Schofield's dog from a couple of episodes ago was trying to wants more of the
Maybe
garden
he's
studio.
interested. Yeah. He's like, yeah, more.
Then you're in conferences then, so it's like, off with all the dive kit and
that's true.
and the muddy oven gloves and kitchen gloves, and then it's like
Your professional wear.
suited up as professional and giving PowerPoints and
You're a little bit tanner, but yeah, completely.
Do you come across many other surfers in this line of work?
Yeah, actually, water people, like, people who are, but yeah, I remember a surfer friend of mine from New Jersey. I saw him at a conference recently. He's a physical oceanographer in Hawaii. He landed the Hawaii job. I'm so jealous. He surfs Diamond Head every day.
Wow.
I was like, I applied for jobs there for like 5 years going. And, but I'm quite happy here. But yeah, I applied, and yeah, I ran into him, and I have another surfer friend. He's a specialist at one of the universities in New Jersey. So I think they do populate. It's that natural interest, right? About kind of just learning more about the environment you like.
And the ones who don't surf, do they do other sort of ocean pursuits, other ocean activities?
Good question. Some do, or some are like just outdoorsy, like climb or sail. But then I have some friends who are purely just fascinated by science and don't surf at all and just love learning about the ocean. And I guess growing up by a sea gives you that. So just seeing the ocean, and there's so much more of that than us.
Yeah.
And, how does it help us? And
we've talked a lot about your research with coral, Sindia, in India, in Indonesia and Borneo, and you've done mud coring cruises to the Norwegian Sea and off New Zealand. You've worked in the Gulf Stream.
Yeah. Part of the work that we did with the mud coring was similar to what I've talked about before, where we were looking at these fossils that were deposited like millions of years ago. And it's kind of interesting because we're living in Wales and the Gulf Stream impacts the climate here. And so we were trying to look at how the Gulf Stream changed the intensity over, say, the last 20,000 years. So when it was very cold in the Ice Age to climate like today. And that work, we got to go in there for a month, and I even got to dip my head in the Gulf Stream. It was quite salty, it is true. And so, yeah, that was a really interesting kind of trip that I got to learn a lot.
Were you at sea the whole time for that trip?
You were at sea. You live in a ship for a month, and you're part of a team, and you either have a morning shift or an evening shift. So you're helping the mud comes on board. You start to process it, so collect samples, look what's there, or you're part of the team that's collecting water, because a lot of the time you also want to look at the temperature of the water, how much nutrients are in it, kind of just anything you can about where these things were living once upon a time.
Yeah.
And also you can track through the Gulf Stream, so you can look at temperature and salinity or the saltiness of the water, and you can see when you go through it, you're like, wow, we're in the Gulf Stream. So as an oceanographer, it was a pretty epic moment. And then
science shows you've gone from just normal ocean to Gulf Stream.
Yeah, and you're like, we're there, okay, let's see if we can find any mud that's from the right time when it was really cold for us to do some cool science.
Okay. Well, it's very relevant to us in Wales because it does keep our temperatures up in the winter, and
that's the reason we top Jersey for
otherwise
winter temperature, isn't it?
Having those freezing temperatures of Jersey. What about your surf travel then over the years? Any favourite places? I know you've got the New Zealand link with your other half.
Yeah. We've done New Zealand and surfed there, and been to, say, Portugal recently and surfed like Peniche and kind of the super tubes and stuff. But I think one of the more memorable trips is I did a few to Central America and the Caribbean, and so as a New Jersey person, it was like California or the Caribbean or Central America. Those are the big destinations. In Puerto Rico. So my mom's from Puerto Rico, and I'd never been there, but I had grown up with that side of the family being Spanish speaking, and so we're gonna do a trip there. We're gonna go surf like Rincon, like the Spanish wave there, and that was just really memorable, I think, because it was being around like a community and people that I'd been brought up with a little bit on this side, and also everybody looked more like me.
Yeah. So you got family there?
I didn't see them. We just surfed the whole time. I aspire to go back one day, and also surfing Costa Rica, actually, because the people were just so lovely, and we had some pretty epic sessions at, we surfed like Playa Grande in those spots, but went up north a little bit to kind of the Jaco area. And I remember getting stuck in one of our cars in the mud trying to get to the surf break and having to retreat, or crossing the water with the crocodiles.
Yeah.
We surfed
What season were you there in?
We were there probably in the winter.
Okay.
Because that was our time to go,
season?
right? January, February.
Okay, I know, good dry season, yeah.
Because that's when you would go, because it's super cold.
Yeah.
But I remember once we took a boat to go surf Ollie's Point.
Yeah.
And then we were all surfing the lineup, and everybody's like, I think there's a stick or a log floating into the lineup. And you're like, no, it's a crocodile.
Big
Get out of there.
crocodile, yeah.
And then, everybody just had to pile
cruise
out.
the lineups, yeah.
And then the brave souls who went back out got a few of the waves by themselves.
Did you go back in?
I think we must have eventually went back in, but I was
give it a bit of
definitely
time.
hesitant.
Have some lunch first.
Some other good memorable places, just surfing California. I think California's got, like, if you grow up in the States, there's all these kind of, like, world-renowned spots, like Black's Beach, Rincon, Steamer Lane, some of the points in the ranch, just, like, I did a trip where we just surfed, like, up and down the coast, and surfing Black's Beach on a good swell.
Quite terrifying.
Yeah.
We saw a fin there once, didn't we?
I got out of the water at Black's. Yeah, we saw a shark.
Yeah,
we went up to the Scripps Institute afterwards to check the fin length, and it was like, I think it was a 15-footer or something.
So
I think it was a baby.
I always went ignorance is bliss, but one time we were surfing Black's, and there was a algal bloom, and so the water was super murky.
Yeah.
There was a guy fishing, and he was pulling in a shark. And
Whoa.
we were all in there like, should we get out? But he's got it on the fishing line. Surely it's okay. We can't see it. And I was like, you know what? I think I draw the line there.
Yeah.
I'm aware that there's a shark in the water.
Yeah.
I'm going to get out.
It's a fact. It's on the line.
Exactly. But a wind and sea, that was a memorable surf session because it's like a reef break, super crowded.
Really localized?
Yeah, super localized. Yeah. And I remember getting 2 waves in before dusk and just being proud of myself that I somehow did that.
to get a wave there. Yeah, definitely.
Such good memories because you grow up hearing about them, reading, and there's this big East Coast, West Coast rivalry, where they get like big Pacific swells and it's always consistent. Anybody I meet's always like, New Jersey, do people surf there? I'm like, Kelly Slater's from Florida, it's the same coastline.
Yeah.
Like, yes, we surf there.
Of course.
We get, low pressure systems, hurricanes, winter swells, and there's some good surf there. And so I think going to California though and seeing actually like surfing Rincon, like first peak, you're like, oh, okay. This is a setup. We don't have this in Jersey.
Yeah. Hang on, you did say that Sandy Hook was a point.
It was a point break
for the record.
For all those New Jersey, shout out to the local.
But it's not a cobble point that's up there with
There's no beachfront houses to walk out from.
although Llantwit, which we're going to come to shortly, is a cobble point. For our listeners, you can hear that Sindia. This is why we've invited you on. You're a great yakker. You tell a good yarn. And you deliver a mean speech, a good presentation. I had you in to come and meet some of my students who were interested in going into STEM careers, and you gave a really great talk on the sort of the dynamics and nuances and of being a woman in the STEM subjects. So that stands for, what is it, the science,
technology, engineering medicine.
And
medicine. Medicine, not math.
And the German PhD student was amazing
Henny,
as well.
Henny, she's my PhD student.
So can I just ask, it would be remiss of me not to ask at this point then, what advice do you have? We know, especially the Vorney episode actually was listened to by a large number of young women, so it was
interesting.
It was. I sent Vorney a message. He was delighted about that.
How do you get that data, Tom?
We got Apple, Spotify, YouTube. You can put it all together.
I know, they're spying on us. I'm
excited to hear my stats after.
So they're listening. What advice have you got for girls looking to go into your line of work?
Right. That's a really good question.
The advice to girls and guys equally is simple, isn't it? It's apply to do it in uni. But for girls who want to get ahead in that field, because it's a thing nowadays, isn't it? To sort of
it is. We talked about things like the leaky pipeline. Like when you get to the super high levels in the university, there's like one woman professor, and but at an undergraduate level, there's like hundreds of females. So I think for me, it was really having these role models and interacting with people that supported me. And kept telling me that I could do it. And for me, it was important to see a woman in a role that was something that I aspired to. And so being lucky enough in my PhD to be around, I think there was a few female scientists who I could see they had a family, they had the job, they somehow made it through the whole process, and they pushed through, and they were comfortable in meetings with where you're the only woman sometimes, And they had that natural interest in science. They wanted to continue. And so I really find that role models, so if you have a network of other females, that support network, or role models that can kind of help you persevere. So having someone like a female professor in my department, being able to see her navigate it all and make it through and being able to talk to her, that's the one thing I think having role models in that network really makes a difference.
Is the leaky pipeline tightening? Is it, so to use the exact opposite metaphor, are STEM careers opening up for women now?
I gotta say, right now, as you asked me in the pandemic, I'd say no, at least today. So over the last 4 months, there's a lot of research showing that most of the time spent away from work has been women. And so they've been looking at a lot of statistics around scientific articles that are submitted for publication, lesser from female. So right now, in these last 4 months, actually, we've taken a bit of a step back. So women who are at those career pinch points where, if they didn't make the transition, they'd probably not go into that field. Those women we're going to maybe lose. So right now, it's really difficult to say.
Right.
Moving maybe a year ago, I would say that, it's a discussion. We're having a discussion and people are opening up to it. And that kind of equality, diversity, inclusivity, that narrative is being brought in. But right now, in this moment, it's really difficult to see how we, are there going to be specific new jobs or fellowships open up for women specifically?
Yeah.
How do we get through this next kind of year? Because it is going to be tricky.
And what about being a woman in the lineup? How does Wales compare to Jersey for female surfers? And how have you found settling into being a local at Llantwit?
Yeah, well, growing up in New Jersey, I had my best friend Marina, and her and I surfed all the time. We were hardcore. Yeah. We'd surf all the time, and having us together. But we were really the only girls in the lineup outside of this other woman who surfed the beach down the way, so we definitely had to navigate that. But people were supportive, but they always were like, Blue Crush movement. And we're like, we surfed before Blue Crush. I know we've got press, but we surfed before. We're like, whatever, we just want to surf. But actually, what I found really nice about coming here is that when I came to Wales, I'm just so surprised at how many female surfers there are. And so, my first experience was surfing white sands maybe a year into being here and meeting Emma, who's a local longboarder ripper, and just chatting.
So that's Emma Curtis.
Emma Curtis. I never knew her last name. It's Emma C.
Emma C.
But she was longboarding, and I think I was longboarding. We were just chatting, and she was just like, a bunch of us surf Rest Bay, and then I started surfing Rest, and I met you and Anne and Claire and Corin, and there's just so many people, and Danielle, and just and there's other people I can't, and it's just such a welcoming community, and everybody really surfs well, and I found that really nice, and everybody kind of, I felt, adopted me to a certain extent, invited me to the surf trips, and that was really unique actually to have, because you guys have a third less population. You have more coastline than us.
Go on, tell us those. You told us the stats.
I prepared my statistics.
Good.
So the population in New Jersey is about 9 million, so 3 times more than here. The coastline is 137 miles long. We're here, it's 1,300 miles long. But the size of Wales and New Jersey, they're both about 20,000 square kilometers. So you would think you'd find less female surfers here. You would think also that, people are keen to surf here, so there's actually quite a lot of people who surf for the population. I was really surprised to find this area, and I really think that having you guys around to tell me when it was good when I was living in Cardiff really supported me through the last 8 years. When I was having kids and doing all that stuff, and also supported me. Floated the idea a lot about moving out here. And thinking about should it be Porthcawl? Got good spot variety.
But you chose Llantwit.
I know, I chose Llantwit.
Why did I not notice that when I was rolling out the beers and making dinner earlier?
Well, I still remember back in the day.
They are big rivals.
I remember back in the day, speaking of rivals, that you asked me once to compete in the Wilkinson Sword at Llantwit.
Yeah.
And I remember that, and I was like, I'd love to, but I was pregnant. And I was like, I don't know, I don't want to fall on the rocks. And,
it wasn't the right time.
So we got to, I think, bring the Wilkinson Sword back somehow.
Don't we? Yeah.
But I think I don't know which club I'd surf for.
To Welsh Coast. You mean Channel? The baddies.
I feel like I'm not educated enough to.
You would be invincible at Llantwit now with your local knowledge.
See, now the thing is, right? they're ruthless at poaching other people's athletes. They are. They got no morals whatsoever. Those Llantwit boys. We've talked about it before. And also some of their dirty underhanded tricks, as we talked about with Mark Vaughan, like they take the opposition out drinking the night before and things like that. But in order for the Wilkinson sword to go back to Llantwit, they have to win it.
Oh, okay.
So we're kind of hoping that doesn't happen, because the sight of them winning it is
maybe I can join the club and help them try.
Oh, okay.
I just know that's fun.
Let's talk Welsh surf spots, though, shall we? So besides Llantwit, where else have you enjoyed surfing?
Oh yeah, White Sands definitely, Freshwater West, Llangennith, like Triple Peaks, Langland Bay. We surfed randomly New Key Harbour that was really random.
Day.
But I really,
storm.
Yeah, it was really big.
And a guy with no boots. I remember that vividly in the middle of winter.
I remember just following you and jumping off the rocks. Yeah,
that's a very, very rare wave to get.
Yeah, we scored though.
Breige did all the masts, had all these like swell models, and was like, "We need to go here for this hour and jump off this rock."
We nearly didn't make it because there was too much coffee drinking going on.
It's
and we
true.
Were like,
oh my
we
god!
Gotta go.
Is there a shout out to Martin John there? Is he how you had it all? Because
I think it was a double one. Martin John and Math, I think, had both given me separate
information on how to score it, right?
Yeah.
But we scored it.
Yeah.
We got some good waves at the right hour too.
Yeah.
It was quite fickle.
And then it just stopped.
Yeah.
And some local guys in, but it was. You had to run over the slippery rocks to get back.
Breige just like jumped in. I was like, okay, I'll just jump in.
Let's go.
But yeah, I think one of my favorites though is Freshwater West. I think I surfed with you guys there once.
Yeah, I remember
but just
that
the
day.
wave, it's just kind of reminds me of Jersey on some of the bigger days and the potential. I wish I have surfed more of like the little reef breaks, but now that I'm in Llantwit, I'm quite happy.
Yeah.
And I'm quite, I'm actually now I think I'm turning into one of those people like I just surf Llantwit all the time, and if it's not good, I just take I then haven't traveled as much, because it's just got so much variety.
Your favourite Llantwit wave?
The point, of course. That's just, God, I'm getting happy talking about it.
Because they're a bit backward.
Yeah,
when they say the point, they mean the left-hander, don't they?
You can go both ways, but
they mean the right-hander, don't they?
Yes, they do. I've had to explain it to my kids several times. The left is the right. But no, the point, it's got everything you want.
Yeah.
It's got the punchiness. You can go left, you can go right. And it's got that great divide. Like, if you can keep up and paddle, you can get the waves.
Yeah.
And so I love it. I'd surf there, like, all the time if I could paddle enough to stay in position.
And since you've been here, Welsh surfers, which Welsh surfers have impressed you?
Well, yeah,
you've impressed Welsh surfers. You're a ripper, but who's impressed you?
Well, I definitely like all the local females who I've mentioned before. Just being able to come up and like we went to the wave not too long ago and all surfed and we were tearing it. But yeah, like all of you guys from here too, like you, Tom, and the local guys from us. But yeah, Llantwit, there's a really good crew of surfers there. We've got like the Vaughan brothers, and I'm kind of getting everybody's name down. You got Jamie Bateman and Liam.
To actually get a chance to speak to people.
Yeah, and like Colin and Gwyn, and there's loads of other ones that I haven't met, like officially got their names because it's a lot. But there's a lot of really good local rippers, and I can see why there's this strong club, and that's quite competitive. But yeah, I really love it there, and I'm slowly kind of getting to know everybody and getting to know the crew.
So you enjoy surfing with the Channel Coast people, do you?
Yeah, I mean, I do. Is this a safe space to say that? Yeah, I do. I think during lockdown as well. I mean, I did get to surf. I've been surfing just loads now, like every day, and I think that's just permanent. I think the more you do that, the more you get to know people. You go surf like the beach for like an hour just because, and you get to know people's lives, and it definitely makes you feel more of a community. And so, I'm liking the Llantwit.
Well, yeah, I think they're enjoying having you in their lineups, and I enjoyed surfing with you earlier in the Esp, and it's been a pleasure having you in the garden studio, Sindia. Thanks for your time, and let's hope that today's session is a promising sign for a good hurricane season over on this side of the Atlantic.
Right, yeah.
Starting any time.
And besides thanking Sindia, as always, Crest extends a big thanks to each and every listener. If you've enjoyed this episode, then I can assure you that Sindia is every bit as approachable in the water as she has sounded during this recording session, so say hi and share your thoughts. Likewise, if you're listening to this and interested in perhaps following Sindia's line of work, she's often a generous communicator with youngsters interested in STEM careers. aspiring scientists can look you up on Cardiff University staff directory, I presume.
I'm on Twitter too.
Okay.
At Sindia Rocks.
Cool.
And as for the rest of the Crest team, we're just as happy to hear listener feedback too, so do get in touch and Tom will tell you how to do so.
Thanks, Breige. Well, do make sure that if you're into these shows that you hit that subscribe button, because then you'll be able to pick us up every Monday until November without having to do any searches at all. And this can be done through YouTube, Apple Podcasts or Spotify. As for contacting us, then the email is castcrest@gmail.com, or we're also on Instagram, where we'll share some of Cindia's posts as well, so you can then follow Sindia too, and you can follow us to get up-to-date info on our guest roster and our episode content. On that note, Breige is going to tell us a little about who's coming up next.
Indeed. Next week we're moving from east to west, and in doing so Crest will be meeting up with one of the country's outstanding surfers from the past 2 decades and more. Gower's James Jones will be taking a quick hour away from his busy life to swap tales for your benefits. For this one, we're also going to experiment with a video feed for the first time. How will it work out? Who knows? But I'm sure the conversation is going to be a great one. As we just said, watch out for it next Monday. Until then, once more, thanks for listening. Sindia, thanks for coming. See you all soon. Diolch am gwrando a gwelwch chi tro nesaf.
Hwyl fawr.
Bye, Auntie.